The planet Varek had no sunsets. The sky shifted from gray to black every 18 hours, and the two moons rose together like pale eyes watching everything below. The cities were tall and cold, built from stone the color of ash. The people who lived there, the Varekians, were tall too. 7 feet at least, with silver skin and eyes like polished obsidian. They had ruled this region of space for 400 years. They did not ask for help. They did not need it. Or so they believed. Marcus Hale arrived on Varek in a cargo ship that smelled like engine grease and old coffee. He was not tall. He was not impressive. He stood 5 feet 10, had calloused hands, short brown hair, and a jaw that looked like it had met a wrench more than once. He carried one bag, one toolbox, and a reputation that had quietly spread across 11 star systems. He fixed things. Not weapons. Not ships. Not the grand machines of war that most engineers chased contracts for. Marcus fixed the small things. The things people had given up on. A child's breathing unit on Delos Prime, declared irreparable by 3 certified engineers. Marcus had it running in 6 hours. A water filtration system on the colony of Reach, dead for 2 years. Marcus brought it back in 4 days using parts from a broken food processor and a piece of pipe he found in a ditch. He did not explain how. He just did it. The Varekians who met him at the landing dock looked at him the way most aliens did. Like he was a mistake. Like something small had wandered into a place built for giants. The lead official, a rigid woman named Sarah, held a data tablet and did not offer a greeting. "You are the human mechanic," she said. "Marcus Hale," he replied and extended his hand. She did not take it. "Follow," she said and turned away. He followed. The city of Varek Prime was quieter than Marcus expected. Cities with 400 years of power usually hummed with confidence. This one felt like it was holding its breath. The streets were clean, the buildings perfectly maintained, but the people moved quickly and kept their eyes low. Something was wrong here. Marcus had spent enough time in broken places to recognize the feeling. Sarah led him to a building that stood apart from the others. It was smaller, older, and surrounded by a garden of pale blue plants that rustled softly in the thin wind. Guards stood at the entrance. Real guards, not ceremonial. Their hands stayed near their weapons. "You will not speak of what you see here," Sarah said before they entered. "You will not ask questions about the Empress or her family. You will do your work and nothing else." Marcus nodded once. Understood. Inside the building was warmer. The floors were dark wood, the walls lined with something that absorbed sound. It felt like a home trying very hard to feel like one. They walked down a long corridor and stopped at a door made of deep green metal. Sarah pressed her palm against it. The door opened without a sound. The room beyond was simple. A bed, a window, soft light. And in a chair beside the window sat a girl. She looked about 12 years old, though Marcus had learned that Varekian aging worked differently. She had silver skin like all her kind, but her eyes were not sharp like Sarah's. They were wide and searching, like she was always looking for something just out of reach. She turned when they entered, and her gaze settled on Marcus with a quiet intensity that caught him off guard. She did not speak. A woman stood near the far wall. She was tall even by Varekian standards, draped in dark fabric, her posture perfectly controlled. But her eyes gave her away. They were red at the edges, the way eyes get when someone has not slept in a very long time. When she looked at Marcus, something moved across her face. Not hope exactly. More like the memory of hope. This was the Empress. "She has not spoken in 3 years," the Empress said. Her voice was steady but only just. "Every healer on this world has tried. Every machine we have has been used. Every treatment known to Varekian medicine has failed." She stepped closer to Marcus. Closer than protocol likely allowed. Her eyes dropped to his toolbox. "I was told you fix what others call broken," she said quietly. "I need to know if that is true." Marcus looked at the girl. The girl looked back at him. "Tell me everything that happened," he said and set his toolbox down. The Empress spoke for 2 hours. Marcus sat on a low stool he had pulled from the corner and listened without interrupting. He did not take notes. He did not nod along to seem polite. He just listened, the way he always did when he was trying to understand something that had already broken. The girl's name was Lyra. 3 years ago she had been healthy. Bright. The Empress described her as a child who spoke constantly, who asked questions that made the royal advisors uncomfortable, who laughed too loud for palace protocol and did not care. Then one morning, without warning, Lyra woke up and could not make a sound. Not a word. Not a cry. Not even a whisper. The healers came first. Then the physicians. Then specialists brought in from 3 other star systems. They scanned her throat, her lungs, her neural pathways. Every scan came back the same. There was nothing physically wrong. Her vocal cords were intact. Her brain showed normal activity. By every medical measure, Lyra should have been able to speak. But she could not. The Empress had tried everything she had the power to try. She had spent resources that would have funded a small war. She had called in debts from allied worlds. She had even, quietly, reached out to human medical centers, because humans had a reputation for approaching problems from strange angles and sometimes getting results that made no logical sense to anyone else. None of it worked. Marcus waited until she was finished. Then he turned to Lyra. "Can I look at your throat?" he asked. Lyra glanced at her mother. The Empress gave a small nod. Lyra turned back to Marcus and opened her mouth slightly, eyes steady and watching him. He leaned forward and looked carefully, then sat back. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Anywhere. Throat, chest, head. Anywhere." Lyra shook her head. "Do you want to speak?" She paused. Then nodded. Slowly. "Okay," Marcus said. He stood and opened his toolbox. Not to take anything out. Just to think. He always thought better when his hands were near his tools. Sarah, who had been standing near the door with her arms crossed, stepped forward. "The problem is neurological. Every specialist confirmed it. There is nothing mechanical to fix here, human. This is not a broken pipe." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's not." "Then what exactly do you intend to do?" He looked at Sarah. "I intend to figure out what everyone else missed." Sarah's jaw tightened. "That is not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He turned back to Lyra. "Would it be all right if I spent some time with her? Alone. No healers, no advisors. Just us." The room went still. The Empress looked at him for a long moment. There was a war behind her eyes. The part of her that was a mother and the part of her that was a ruler were fighting each other, and Marcus could see both clearly. 2 hours, she said finally. Sarah moved to object. The Empress raised one hand and Sarah went silent. Everyone left. Marcus sat across from Lyra and did something that surprised her. He did not examine her. He did not pull out instruments or run tests. He reached into his bag and took out a small, half-broken mechanical bird. Metal wings, a cracked beak, gears visible through a gap in its chest. He set it on the table between them and started repairing it quietly, his hands moving with the slow confidence of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Lyra watched. After a few minutes, one wing began to move. Just slightly. A small, stuttering motion. Lyra's eyes widened. Marcus kept working. By the time the wing was moving smoothly, Lyra had leaned forward in her chair. Her hands were on the edge of the table. Her eyes were alive in a way they had not been since they walked in. Marcus looked up and smiled. Not a big smile. Just a quiet one. "What broke it?" he asked, nodding at the bird. Lyra reached out and touched the bird's wing gently. Then she pointed to the cracked beak. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think the beak?" She nodded firmly. He looked at the beak again. Really looked. And then something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. He had been looking at the wrong part. He stood up slowly, eyes distant, turning something over in his mind. Lyra watched him, sensing the change. She tapped the table twice to get his attention. He looked at her. She pointed at herself. Then at her throat. Then at the bird's beak. Marcus stared at her. "Show me," he said quietly. "Show me exactly what you mean." Lyra moved fast. She grabbed a piece of paper from the small desk near the window and a thin drawing tool beside it. Her hand moved across the page in quick, certain strokes. She was not drawing randomly. She knew exactly what she wanted to show. When she held it up, Marcus leaned in close. It was a diagram. Rough but clear. She had drawn something that looked like a tunnel with a wall built across the middle. On one side of the wall, there was a small figure with an open mouth. On the other side, silence. Just empty space. Marcus stared at it. "The path is there," he said slowly. "But something is blocking it." Lyra nodded hard. Her eyes were intense, almost urgent, like she had been trying to show someone this for 3 years and no one had understood. Marcus sat back down. His mind was moving fast now. Every specialist had looked at her vocal cords, her lungs, her brain signals. All the obvious places. All the places a trained medical mind would look first. And they had found nothing because the equipment they used was designed to find what they already knew how to find. He thought about the mechanical bird. The beak had looked fine from the outside. The wings were the moving parts, so everyone assumed the wings were the problem. But the beak connected to a small internal pin that controlled the rhythm of the whole system. Crack the beak, misalign the pin, and the wings lost their signal. Everything looked intact. Everything tested as normal. But the connection was broken at a point no one thought to check. He looked at Lyra. Has anyone scanned the small connective tissue between your upper resonance nodes and your primary signal cord? Lyra blinked, then slowly shook her head. Do you even know what I just said? She tilted her head and gave him a look that clearly meant she understood more than he expected. He almost smiled. Right. Sorry. He stood and went to the door. Sarah was in the corridor, arms still crossed, expression still tight. The Empress stood a few steps further back, perfectly still, watching. I need a deep resonance scanner, Marcus said. Not a standard medical unit. The kind used for structural analysis of layered biological tissue. Varikian engineering uses them for bridge integrity testing. I need one calibrated to organic material. Sarah stared at him. That is a construction tool. Yes. You want to use a construction scanner on the Empress's daughter. I want to find something every medical scanner missed, Marcus said. Medical scanners look for medical problems. This is not a medical problem. It is an engineering problem. Silence. The Empress stepped forward. Get him the scanner, she said. Sarah opened her mouth. Now, the Empress said. It took 40 minutes. Marcus spent that time sitting with Lyra again, asking her simple questions she could answer by pointing or nodding. He learned that the silence had started after a fall. Not a serious one. She had tripped on a staircase in the palace and hit the side of her neck against a stone railing. Everyone had checked her for injury. No bruising. No fractures. No swelling. She had been declared unharmed. 3 days later she stopped speaking. When the scanner arrived, Marcus spent 20 minutes recalibrating it himself, adjusting the frequency range down to a level fine enough to read micro-level tissue structure. Sarah watched every move with barely hidden contempt. 2 royal physicians stood near the wall, arms folded, faces carefully neutral. Marcus did not rush. When he was ready, he ran the scanner slowly along the side of Lyra's neck, watching the display with the focused calm of someone reading a language they had spent a lifetime learning. The physicians saw numbers and graphs. Marcus saw a story. And then he stopped. Right there, at the junction between 2 structures so small they had no medical name in standard Varikian terminology, was a thin band of compressed tissue. Not broken. Not torn. Just pressed slightly out of position by the impact of the fall, sitting against a signal-carrying fiber like a thumb pressed gently on a garden hose. The signal was not gone. It was being held back. One of the physicians stepped forward and looked at the display. His expression shifted. He looked at Marcus, then back at the screen. That structure is considered non-functional in current medical literature, he said carefully. Vestigial. Then your literature is wrong, Marcus said quietly. He straightened and looked at Lyra. She was watching him with wide, still eyes. I found it, he said. Her breath caught. But fixing it, Marcus said slowly, is going to be the hard part. The room got very quiet. Marcus stood with the scanner in his hands and explained what he had found in plain, simple terms. The compressed tissue. The blocked signal. The way the fall had shifted something so small that no standard medical tool had reason to look for it. He drew a quick sketch on the same paper Lyra had used, showing the block, showing the fiber behind it, showing what needed to move and by how much. The 2 royal physicians listened without speaking. When he finished, the older one stepped forward. Even if your theory is correct, he said carefully, the tissue sits within 1 millimeter of the primary neural cord. Any instrument precise enough to manipulate it would require a surgical hand steadier than anything our equipment can guide. One wrong movement. He paused. One wrong movement and the girl loses all vocal function permanently. Or worse. I know, Marcus said. Our finest surgical systems have a margin of error of 0.3 millimeters, the physician continued. The target zone you are describing is 0.1. Our machines cannot operate there safely. I know that too, Marcus said. Sarah stepped forward. Her voice was flat and hard. Then we are back where we started. You found the problem. You cannot fix it. This changes nothing. Marcus set the scanner down on the table. He reached into his toolbox and lifted out a small instrument. It looked almost laughably simple. A narrow handle, a curved tip no wider than a strand of wire, and a pressure gauge the size of a thumbnail built into the grip. He had made it himself, 3 years ago, to remove a jammed component from inside a navigation crystal on a ship where no manufactured tool could reach. He held it up. I can operate there, he said. Everyone stared. The older physician moved closer and examined the instrument without touching it. His expression was unreadable. You are proposing to do this by hand, he said. Yes. Freehand micromanipulation. On living tissue. With no surgical guidance system. Yes. You are not a surgeon. No, Marcus said. I'm a mechanic. But I have been working inside spaces this small for 15 years. My hands know how to be still. The physician looked at him for a long moment. Then he stepped back. If you slip, he said quietly, the damage will be irreversible. She will never speak. She may lose other functions. The risk is not small. I understand the risk, Marcus said. Do you? Sarah said sharply. Because if you fail, you will have destroyed the Empress's daughter. On this world, that is not something you walk away from. The threat was clear. Marcus did not flinch. He turned to the Empress. She had not spoken since the physicians began talking. She stood near the window, one hand resting at her side, the other pressed flat against the wall beside her as if she needed something solid to hold onto. Her eyes were on Lyra. Lyra was watching Marcus. She had followed everything. Every word, every drawing, every argument. She was 12 years old and had been silent for 3 years, and she understood exactly what was being discussed. Marcus could see it in her face. She was not afraid of the procedure. She was afraid he would say no. Marcus walked to her and crouched down so they were at eye level. This is your choice, he said. Not your mother's. Not mine. Yours. If you want me to try, I will try. If you want to wait or find another way, I will respect that. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her small hand over his. The one holding the instrument. She pressed it gently, firmly toward herself. Marcus held her gaze. Okay, he said. He stood and looked at the Empress. Her eyes were wet. She nodded once and it cost her everything. The room was prepared quickly. A reclining chair, clean light, 2 physicians standing by in case something went wrong. Sarah stood near the door with her arms at her sides, her face unreadable but her eyes tracking every movement. Marcus washed his hands. He checked his instrument one final time. He pulled a low seat close to Lyra and sat down. Stay very still, he said. She nodded. He leaned in. His hands were calm. His breathing was slow. The room held its breath around him. The tip of the instrument touched the edge of the target zone. And then the door burst open. One of the palace officials rushed in, breathing hard. He looked at the Empress with wide, alarmed eyes. Your Majesty, he said. The High Council has been informed. They are sending a delegation. They say the human must be removed from the premises immediately. The Empress did not turn around. She kept her eyes on Marcus and spoke in a voice that was quiet and absolute. Close the door, she said to the official. And tell the High Council that whatever they wish to discuss can wait until I am ready to speak with them. The official hesitated. Your Majesty, they were very clear. They are invoking the accord of. Close the door, she said again. He closed the door. Sarah moved forward. The Council has authority under the accord to intervene in matters that affect the Imperial line. If they reach this room before the procedure is complete, then Marcus needs to finish before they arrive, the Empress said. She looked at him. How long? Marcus had not moved. His hands were still. His instrument was still positioned exactly where he had placed it before the interruption. 10 minutes, he said. Maybe less. But I need silence. Complete silence. If I am startled mid-movement, it ends badly. The Empress nodded. She walked to the door herself and stood in front of it. Straight-backed, arms at her sides, eyes forward. A ruler standing guard at her own daughter's door. No one enters, she said. Sarah looked at her for one long moment. Then she moved to stand beside her. Marcus turned back to Lyra. The girl had not moved. Through the interruption, the raised voices, the tension that had filled the room like smoke, she had stayed perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes were on Marcus. She trusted him completely and she showed it without a single word. He leaned in again. The instrument moved in fractions. Not millimeters. Smaller than that. Marcus worked by feel as much as sight, the same way he had learned to work inside navigation crystals and pressure valves and the tiny mechanical hearts of machines that others had written off. His breathing was slow and even. His wrist did not shake. Years of patience lived in his hands, and he gave every bit of it to this moment. The compressed tissue was right where the scanner had shown it. A small, firm resistance against the tip of the instrument. He applied the gentlest possible pressure, lateral and careful, easing rather than pushing, guiding rather than forcing. Nothing happened for 30 seconds. Then something gave way. Just slightly. A microscopic shift. Marcus felt it through the instrument the way a fisherman feels a line go slack. He held the position, checked with a breath, and moved again. Another fraction. Another small release. The fiber behind the tissue was visible now on the scanner screen that one of the physicians was monitoring silently beside him. The physician leaned in. His eyes widened slightly. He said nothing, but his hand moved to grip the edge of the table. Marcus made one final adjustment. Lyra gasped. It was not a word. It was just air, sudden and sharp, rushing in as if something that had been held underwater for 3 years had finally broken the surface. Her eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her throat. Marcus sat back slowly. He set the instrument down. He looked at her. "Try," he said softly. Lyra opened her mouth. For one terrible second nothing came. Then, in a voice that was rough and small and completely real, she said, "Mama." The room broke. The physician turned away and pressed his hand over his mouth. Sarah, who had not moved from the door, closed her eyes and exhaled a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. The Empress spun around and crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her daughter into her arms and held her there, shaking, saying nothing because there were no words large enough for what she was feeling. Lyra said it again. "Mama." Clearer this time. Stronger. The Empress made a sound that was not a word at all. It was just grief and relief and 3 years of waiting pouring out of her at once. Marcus picked up his toolbox quietly. He did not want to interrupt. The High Council arrived 11 minutes later. They entered to find the Empress seated beside her daughter, holding her hand, listening to her speak in a voice that grew steadier with every sentence. Lyra was telling her mother about a dream she had remembered but never been able to share. She was talking fast like someone making up for lost time. The lead council member looked at the scene. Then at Marcus, who stood near the wall, toolbox at his feet, waiting to be told where to go and what to sign. "What has happened here?" the council member asked. "A human fixed what we could not," the physician said simply. The council member looked at Marcus for a long moment. The arrogance in his expression did something complicated. It did not disappear. But it moved, shifted, made room for something else. He inclined his head. Just slightly. Marcus nodded back. Outside, the 2 pale moons of Varek were rising together over the gray city. The streets below were the same as always, tall buildings, cold stone, people moving quickly with their eyes down. But in one small room in a quiet building surrounded by pale blue plants, a girl was talking. And her mother was listening. And the silence that had lasted 3 years was finally, completely gone.